who is talented like you.
Oh, well, thank you. I appreciate it. You're a
Well,
champion
no,
for musicians, and that's, I think, the biggest thing that we need right now. So thank you.
I appreciate your acknowledging that, because there was a time when I fancied myself a musician, a performing artist, and one day a lightning bolt went off, and I realized that I wasn't going to be cut out for the artist's life. Well, I had a creative bone, but um, I kind of dedicated to myself and my career to helping artists manifest their dreams into reality. So I guess my first real question for you is, when did you know that you were an artist?
I think I don't know if I knew first. I think the story that sort of resonates with me that I don't remember that my parents told me was they took me to a friend's piano recital. I was really young. I think I was like 2 or 2.5 or something. And it was sort of like risers. And I was sitting in front of them. And they were talking, my mom and dad were talking to each other about, they were like whispering how intently I was watching the performance. And I turned around and they were like, look at her. Like, that's kind of, and I turned around to them with my little chubby finger and I was like, shh. And I, surprised them and they're like, how did she know that like we were being that's not what you do? And I just going like shh to my parents. So soon after I started taking piano lessons, and it was always a hobby, so I would never have said, oh, I'm an artist per se, but I think it was always a hobby until I got to college. And in college I I was in a cappella groups. I was, I just loved doing all the music sort of stuff. I had been playing the piano forever, and I was just interested in music enough to take a lot of electives in college. And I wanted to be a marine biologist. I didn't have pictures of rock stars and musicians on my walls growing up. It was always like whales and dolphins. And
Right, right,
so when I got to college, I was taking all these electives just because I was interested in music, and it was my advisor that
right.
said, "Hey, what if you just take a couple extra credits? You could actually double major in um, in music and biology." And I was like, "Okay, that sounds good." So that was the first time I realized
Wow.
that there could be equal weight from the arts and the sciences and all that stuff.
Right.
So yeah, that's kind of that was in college I was like, okay, I can acknowledge this as something that is of equal importance. And my parents
Right.
they were supportive of
Right.
the music endeavor, but they still would say, how are the biology classes go? And I'd be like, let me tell you about this film scoring class I'm taking. And but they were like, well, we want to know about the important classes. I'm like, they all count the same towards my GPA. So
Right.
my first job out of college, I was actually did the science thing. I got a job scuba diving for the government doing water quality research for the United States Geological Survey. So that
Hmm.
was something I did for 6 months. And then we had a little break because the river froze that we were working on. And
Oh
a
my
friend of
goodness.
my parents, who was a young filmmaker, invited me to go to Rome, Italy with him for a month to write music and help create some videos for a website that he was hired to create for a hotel. So he got put up in the hotel, and that was the first time I was like, I'm getting paid to travel to do music. This is interesting to me, and I kind of never looked back. So that I think that was probably the first actual moment I was like, I'm gonna try this. And
Cheryl, our stories are so similar.
you
It's
went scuba
scary.
diving for the government?
Yeah, you know what? I did. I actually was a systems engineer for IBM. I was a technical science person too.
Oh my god.
And I had this opportunity when working for IBM to actually perform for members of the company. And I spent 3 months in Miami performing and hanging out by the pool with the Temptations and the Four Tops. And I said, I need to look into this more. And so that was the beginning of my pursuit of learning more about the business, and obviously, you know, kind of taking my appreciation for all different kinds of music, more seriously from a professional point of view. And nothing's more professional for a musician than going to Juilliard. How did that come about?
Yeah. So, by the way, this is Enzo. He was sitting on my lap,
Hello,
and now
Enzo. And
he's
now he wants to.
he just wants all the kisses. He's my little rescue. We He's my quarantine rescue. So
Oh, wow.
we so I went to Cornell. That's where I was doing my
Hmm.
biology and music major, and then went to Rome, came back, realized I wanted to do music, moved to New York City, wrote music for some really terrible horror films, got a job as a messenger in Manhattan for an advertising company. And then that's how I met some people that own a jingle house in New York City. And so I got a job as the assistant tech at a jingle house. So that took me all the way through till I was about 26 or 27, and I started realizing that I didn't want to just spend my whole life writing 30 like I didn't want to score. The job that had me like realize maybe there's something else was when I was scoring a Lysol commercial, and they were like, "We need the theme for the germs." It was like a little cartoon germ to be more impactful. And I was like, "What does that even mean? Like, what are you talking about? I'm not scoring germs in the toilet bowl for the rest of my life." So I started scoring independent documentaries, and I realized that I really loved the sound of an orchestra score, but that was
Yes.
a hole in my education. So I
Yes.
decided to enroll in Juilliard, not with the purpose of getting a degree, which I actually didn't get, but just to take some
Mhm.
courses to fill some of my musical holes, so to speak.
Right. Well, that's really remarkable because a lot of times what we find, is people almost do it the other way around, where they, study, orchestration and arranging and things of that nature, and they want to be in the legitimate music world, the classical world for the legitimacy of it, et cetera. But then, in order to pay the bills, they end up scoring commercials, jingles, whatever,
Mm-hmm.
and doing things that are more commercially oriented and not necessarily artistic, although they do require craft, you know, just even knowing that the germs have their own theme.
Yep. Yep.
You
Those
know,
did.
yeah. So it's remarkable that you kind of flipped it on its head and you're like, yeah, I've been doing this thing professionally. Let me go kind of learn, the ups and downs of it. I was always a pop music person. My family was into jazz and R&B and soul, and yes, I played in the orchestra. I played viola and I understood string parts and things of that nature. But my professor of the choral group on campus he actually was nominated for a Grammy a few years ago. I ran into him on the red carpet and I was just like, Julius P. Williams. And he's like, Thornell T. Jones. And anyway, big joke. He was the one who he was scoring Dynasty back in the 80s. And so he would come over and he'd show me the his pass that was synced to the temp that was synced to the scene, and he taught me about how, look, when somebody comes on the screen, their theme comes up, and when they go away, their theme goes away, and so everybody has their own little theme music within the context of the show. So you're talking about the germs, just kind of brought that all back. I'm like, how anyway, it's because you're a professional, and that's how that works. But you weren't, I mean, just a technical person. You went to school to study orchestration. What came next?
What came next was working at this commercial house, this jingle house, and starting to not just be their tech person there, but I would wait until the composers that had their gorgeous studios would go home at night, and then I would stay later and try to write music on the commercials that they were scoring. And so what ended up happening was I started winning some of those spots, and so I got my own little composer room. And then I was like, this is a really great studio. So I was like, I have some songs, maybe I should put a band together and like record them here, because I have this studio I can use after
Yeah,
hours, because I was in my
yeah,
20s. They were all like had
sure.
married and kids. And so I put a band together. We started doing some gigs in New York City, and I was like, oh, I like gigging. So I started touring on the weekend. One thing led to another. I made a couple piano pop albums, started touring with my band, got invited to a couple of festivals in Switzerland, and was traveling in Europe. And so I ended up leaving the Jingle House to do that singer-songwriter touring thing full time. And
Well,
that
you just kind
included,
of zoomed right through that.
yeah,
That's like, it was like, oh, it just happened. I'm like, let's drill down on that, because a lot of students and a lot of, Grammy people are working musicians, and that's something that resonates with them. The idea that, you were, I mean, thank goodness you had a day gig that you could leverage into the recording process and things of that nature. Um, but how did that decision that you made to pursue that, it's pretty pivotal to your story. So
Yeah, well, I didn't make the decision. See, the thing is,
there you go.
the thing is, I've made a lot of decisions in my day, but this one was not one of them. This one,
Okay.
well, maybe I made it like kind of, um, sort of
Subconsciously.
subconsciously, and like created. Enzo's very annoying me right now. I might have to throw
Mm-hmm.
him out the door. But what I ended up doing was I made an agreement with the producer, and it was all like I said, family men. It's a
Sure.
small company, sort of been around. They all been there from the start of the company, and I felt like welcomed, and I loved everyone there, and I learned a lot from everyone. And I had an agreement with the owners that I could leave early on Friday nights, so that I could go to like Portland or Philadelphia or Boston and do a gig on Friday night, a gig on Saturday night, like a morning radio show on Sunday. And I would like every weekend try to get out and like tour a little bit in these mini tours. Yes, you're annoying. And then I all of a sudden got fired. And the reason I got fired was because
Wow.
apparently some of the people that had been there a really long time were like, she's 1 foot out the door. And I asked my boss about that. And they're like, no, we know that you're the most productive person here. And I was like, so what's the problem? It was just politics. It was really just like, well, we want to keep you, but that means like then half of the people will have to go, and it's either you or like the people complaining about just, it was really a perception thing that it seemed like because I was, really into what I was doing and passionate meant that I couldn't be passionate at two things. So they made that decision for me. Oh, Allison
Oh,
needs to mute
sorry.
herself. Um, Allison, darling, you might want to mute because we're gonna get some echoes. But there are some decisions that you make, and then other decisions that seem in the moment to be made for you, and that was one of them for me. Um, at the time, I was dating a mountain guide who lived in northern New Hampshire. I actually met him at one of my shows in Portland, Maine. So I called him and I was like, "Can I come visit you?" And I just needed to like get out of the city, right?
Yes.
I lived in
Yes.
Harlem for 12 years. I had this great place that was rent stabilized. It was like the most gorgeous building. I was there until a couple years ago, and I just loved it. But I was like, I need to be not here, and so it took
Right.
me a little bit to recover, but I realized that I was really good at making money when I gigged. So I was like, all right, we're going to go do some gigs. I would play ski resorts and libraries and
Yes.
like places that would pay you and like wouldn't
Right.
cost a lot. I would do them solo. I would go with my band. I would go with just my drummer, my bassist, or like some combination of my band.
Mm-hmm.
And I started going back to like film scores and documentaries, and I ended up getting a somewhat regular freelancing gig with collegehumor.com, which is kind of like Funny or Die. They make really
Mm-hmm.
silly like parody videos and comedy videos. So I had that for, I did a couple web series for them, which is really neat. So I had that sort of scoring gig, and that got me a couple other films, and I met some directors through that. And started licensing my music and doing another record. And before you know it, I have 4 pop records out. I had 40 placements on TV and film, and I started getting asked to speak at music conferences about how to make the how to make it as a totally indie artist. And that's that kind of was the path, and that led me to actually creating some online courses for musicians, filling some holes that I found personally. Like there's no training on pitching
Right.
or communicating, really, like email
Right.
marketing. Like there's not
Yes.
that's not a thing that musicians do well. No one does.
Right.
And so I kind of
Right.
went down a digital marketing rabbit hole to learn about it.
Mm-hmm.
And I really learned that, from the beginning, I was always really comfortable on email, really comfortable communicating with my fans. I fan
Right.
funded 2 out of my two recent records. I completely fan funded. They just gifted me. I mean, literally, I sent an email being like, should I take out a billboard ad for the Grammy edition? And they were like, within 24 hours, I had people sending me money to PayPal, and we raised the money to do the billboard ad without me even like doing a campaign for it. So that's the power of that was all over email, like all through my fans. And I don't have thousands and thousands and thousands of people on my email list. It's like that's how you do it well. And I knew that a lot of musicians were missing that. Like a lot of independent musicians that I was meeting at these conferences were
Right.
really missing that. I'm gonna toss them out the door. Hold on. You tell me things.
Okay, no problem.
No. he normally he just like sits on my lap, but he's like real excited about this conversation. I guess I don't know.
Well, I guess you're telling the story that he's always wanted to hear.
So
Maybe I am. It is some okay. So you share with me some of the comments that are coming back to you about your newest album, Luminary, and one of them. Actually, all of them really resonated with me. But I just, the idea that people are so engaged with you, not only as, your music, but with you as a person, means that you do know how to connect with people by email and through your fan um, infrastructure and stuff like that. You're the kind of artist that Patreon goes after, the kind of artist that, you know,
they've tried.
they've tried. I'm sure they have.
I have
I'm
like
sure
a
they
fan page
have.
sitting there, like that's like not doing anything, and I think I get like $2 a month from Patreon. I'm like literally not like I'm not doing anything. I'm paying for
Yeah,
this.
because you're not doing with them. But I mean, but you have figured out within your own context how to engage with and monetize your fan base. And that, as a independent artist, it's fundamental, particularly in this pandemic that we're dealing with.
Yeah.
It's really, really, really tough. Um, I kind of want to, before we kind of like dive into Luminary, because that's my entry point into your journey, into your musical journey.
Yeah.
Would you like to play something for us? Some.
Sure. I mean, I feel like we should talk about it first because it's kind of weird if I just play it. I've been talking about all my pop and commercial stuff, so I mean,
Well,
let's
this is
talk
the
about it
pivot.
first. What?
Well, I mean, okay, have it your way. You are the honored guest,
I
honored
mean,
and
I'll play
esteemed
something, but people are gonna
guest.
be like, "Wait, she was just talking about pop and commercial music, and this is not that."
I
So I feel like it has no
understand.
setup. But we
Well,
can play
okay,
it.
this is the reason why I wanted to kind of do it this way, because we have been talking about everything from commercial music to studying orchestration to touring and things happen to you and you're making a decision, and then along comes you know this opportunity, and I guess we could set it up this way. um, all the comments and things, whether they're on your, and everybody, you should take the time, 5 minutes and 17 seconds to watch the behind the scenes making of the Luminary video. It is so compelling and so wonderful, and it really kind of illuminates not only your creative process, but also, you know, your humanity. And I think that's one of the things that really, made me want to engage more with you, was that not only were you this wonderful, wonderful, practitioner of music, but you, through all of this musical journey, were also on a spiritual journey. And so, I think our first conversation, I was just like, so how did you get to Greece? And you were like, how did you get to Greece? And
Yeah.
that's my
So I went
question.
to Greece. Yeah, I went to Greece because I went to Greece last year. That's where I wrote and recorded Luminary.
Bam.
Um, but I went there because a year before I was really getting sick of my marriage and I applied to like a bajillion artist residencies, like 2 week things that I could just get away without actually like dealing with anything. We worked stuff out. It was fine. But a year later, I find myself getting accepted to these residencies and I'm like, bye, honey. Now I'm going to Greece. He's like, that's so great. You got into a composer residency. I'm like, it is. It is. It's
Yes, it
funny.
is.
Um, but I really had been dealing with anxiety for over a decade, and when I got to Greece, I went and I actually applied with the idea that I was going to write a choral album because that's one of the things that I do. I write a lot of music for social justice choirs, and so I was like, all right, I'm going to write the text, and maybe I'll like. I brought a little teeny travel keyboard. I'm like, I don't know. It was an artist residency, so there were painters and sculptors, and I didn't know what the setup would be. And then they're like, here's your room. and it's this stone room with a perfectly tuned grand piano Yamaha, and I was like, and we're going to do a piano record. And that was just like all other ideas like out the
Right.
window. And being a piano player, I always had wanted to do a piano record, but I imagined that I would have to like sit down and write like classical notes and like learn my music, and none of that felt good. And I was like, I can't just sit and improvise because I'm like terrible at jazz. My dad could like sit and play anything, and I like just literally, I was like, I'm not an improviser, but I also don't want to write like a classical piano record. So I just never thought that that was going to be a thing for me. But hearing this piano, I was like, we're gonna figure it out. I had this little teeny mic, my travel mic, with me just for like ideas, and I was like, I'm gonna see how good it is recording. And I ended up, I had to record at night when the cicadas were asleep, because when the sun's out, they were loud. Mother effers. And my mic would pick them up, so I actually had to like schedule when I worked, how I worked on this record around the cicadas, which is in the video if you want to know what I'm talking about.
Yes,
They're
that's
so
a
loud.
hilarious part of the story.
Yeah, it is hilarious, that and the stray dogs, which I can get to. But knew I had 15 days, and I knew that I had to complete it in 15 days. Not necessarily the mixing and the production, but like I needed to record all the stuff I wanted, because I was never going to be able to recreate that live room sound. I mean, I'm sure there are engineers out there that could do this digitally, but I loved the idea that it was so raw, and the source of the sounds is just that piano, the room sound, and I did some humming and breath stuff, and then a little bell. And the word luminary means you're the source of light. So I love
Right.
this idea of like just having this raw, simple, like no synthesizers, no anything. And so I would just basically record I would pick a key and a tempo each day. So I did 12 different tracks, 10 made it to the record, and each one is in a different key, almost, and all the tempos I wanted to be above resting heart rate, because in my search for calming my anxiety, I found that there was not a lot of meditation music that wasn't either like melodic, pretty classical piano music. My head would get caught onto the melodies, so I would not
Right.
be present. My anxiety would stay there because I wasn't looking at it. Or it was like drony, kind of typical, like put me to sleep, and that didn't work either. So I was like, I want something that will keep me present, that I can listen to while I'm driving. That
Right.
doesn't need a disclaimer like, don't listen to this while
You're
operating
driving.
heavy machinery.
Right,
Like
right,
so
right, right.
many meditations you hear that
Mhm.
disclaimer, and I was like, I don't want that. I want this to keep you present. So I would record a couple, like maybe 2 to 3 minutes of piano motifs in the key and the tempo. So I had a click in my ear just so it would help me with editing later, and reverbs and all that sort of stuff. And I plucked piano strings, and I sort of did some John Cage stuff. Um, and then the next day, during the daytime, when the cicadas were screaming their heads off, I would work in other places around. I brought some good headphones, and I would produce that stuff. I would reverse some of the audio, and I would turn it into a 6 minute piece, because I knew I wanted exactly an hour. I wanted 6 10 minute pieces on this
10 minute
record
songs.
that
Right,
could be a full yoga class, that could be a full an hour meditation.
right.
And so I wrote this there, and then I had it pretty. I had the 6 minute pieces pretty much complete. I came back, and then I had another residency in upstate New York where I mixed it officially. And I've mixed my own commercials and some film scores. I've never mixed my own album that I've released and put out there in the world. And with no drums and no lead vocals, I was like, I can do this. It's just like a film score. That's like the feel. And if you watch the making of video, you'll see that it was not as easy as I thought it was going to be. I caught
No, it
myself crying
wasn't.
once or twice.
Yes.
But the voices are the reason it wasn't
Yes.
working, not just the mixing. It was like, you're not good enough to do that. What do you think? You're now doing a record. And I had sent some rough mixes to a few people, and there were rave reviews. A couple meditation apps picked it up before it was even mastered, and I was like, and then I had like thousands of people listening to it before I had even released it, and I was like, oh. And it was kind of like a thing that I'd created that like calmed me down on the plane. My mom listened to it on the plane. She's always anxious, and because we met after my Greece residency, I had a choral thing in France, and she actually came to France and met me for that. So we were able to fly home together, and she listened to it, and she was like, I could see her calm, and I was like, maybe I'm onto something. Like I know that when I listen to it and I'm driving, I honk less. Like
Uh-huh.
I'm a nicer person. So
Hmm.
one thing led to another, and I realized that I might have something worth shooting for charts and sales and Grammys and things. Like, let's play the game that I'd always played as a pop artist, but just was in
Right,
this field as an indie artist that felt impossible to rise through. And here
right.
with Luminary, it felt um, it felt doable. It felt like it was doing something. It felt like for the the first time, it wasn't me trying so hard. It was actually coming
Hmm.
naturally.
Yes,
So
yes. And everything that you have shared, I'm sure people are applauding in the background. And those people who are going to watch this and hear this are going to say, Amen, sister.
well, I think
Because
Citrine. Thanks, Citrine.
yes,
So
yes,
sweet.
yes. Thank you, Citrine. Um, it's been a I mean, it's just fascinating because everything that you're saying is just so important, and just you know, I think I shared with you by email. I don't know if you got it. That the other day I just moved, and the move was like a yeoman's task. I moved from Manhattan to Miami, and so I'm sitting here. It's a little echoey here because I'm sitting in my completely empty apartment.
Whoa.
And it's been, the last like month has been crazy. And, I was just here completely stressed out after, moving. And my intuition was like, put on Cheryl's album. And I put your album on, and I was just like, oh, I'm better now.
Wow.
So I've got my own testimony, and it's real. It's, trust me, I was just like, what am I going to do? What am I going to do? What am I going to do? And I said, Luminary. I pulled up Spotify and put it on.
Oh my gosh, I love
And
that. I love that so much. I actually have to do that more often. Like a friend of mine is like, "Are you stressed out right now?" I'm like, "Yeah, oh my god." She's like, "Have you turned your record on?" I was like, "I have not. I should do that." It's really that I love that. And the thing about it, it's like sometimes you turn on what you think meditation music is and it's already like peaceful and happy, but you're not there yet. So
yes.
what I wanted to do with each of these pieces was I actually chose a word for each of the 10 pieces that ended up on the record. And the idea was to either attract something or release something, like attract
Mm-hmm.
abundance, attract love,
Right.
or release negativity, release anxiety. So each one has a
Mm-hmm.
theme, and the idea was to sort of meet the listener where they were at emotionally, if they were like, okay, I'm struggling with something and I want to move through it. And so a lot of them start a little darker, a little minor,
Mm-hmm.
and take you over the 6 minutes, take you through to a
Mm-hmm.
place of more power, calm, whatever the theme
Mm-hmm.
is for that. Some of them just go from minor to major. Others have some panning stuff going on, and others play around with tempo. But there's that sort of progression, so that if you are feeling anxious, you can like latch on to that rather than like try to
Right.
force not anxious on you,
Yes.
which never works. So
No, it doesn't. And then your mind wanders.
yeah.
Yeah. And it's very true. So it's very practical, but that's probably, your orchestration training and arranging and commercials and stuff like that. You understand it's a process, it's a journey to get to that place. Um, and so that's part of the craft. And so that's why so many people are like, Luminary has changed the game in New Age music, because it actually is very practical in terms of how you can use it and incorporate it into your spiritual practice. Um, and I can't say it enough. That's not the only time that I played the record, obviously, but the other day it came to me that this was a tool for getting myself centered, and absolutely 6 minutes I was in a whole different place.
I love that.
So
I love
that
that.
is that is my setup
Yeah, well, that's what I
for
think.
you to
I think
share.
so much music can do that for you, and sort of manipulate emotions in different ways. And I say manipulate with like the best intention behind it, not
Sure.
the way we normally think of that word. But
Yeah.
like a film score manipulates you. Watch Jaws without the film score, and it is not scary. It is like almost humorous. But
It
like
is almost humorous.
so there's like a manipulation element of music, and so many records out there can do this for you, but I think so many of them are not intentional about doing it, and I
Yeah.
think that's what made Luminary different. Like when I sat down, I was like, this is I want to, when I am feeling this, I want to start here and I want to end up here, and I want the whole album as a whole. If you are going to listen
Mm-hmm.
16, I don't want to keep bringing you back to those bad places.
Right.
How can you keep leveling up
Right.
so that by the
Right.
end, so there is an arc overall with these little arcs in between that you can
Yes.
pick out as you need. And that was all very intentional, and I
Mm-hmm.
think that brings out my dorky science background. Like I definitely brought in elements of that, so I think that is what makes this different. Instead of sitting down and saying I want to write something in the new age genre and whip out some synthesizers and reverbs and stuff, I was like, I was a little more, to me, just from the, my perspective of the process, it was intentional. And I've written 4 pop records where I was really just sharing it was my self-expression, right?
Right.
Sharing my stories. And like, yes, when someone resonates, like, oh, I had that same kind of breakup, or I was that angry, and I like, I have this song, I will get over this, steaming hearts. Like, people really resonate with that because they felt angry too. But that was all about me and my
Right.
anger. It just happens that other people felt that too, which is
Hmm.
the power of music to connect in that way. But this was not really that. This was intentionally like, hey, let's go on this journey together anytime we listen to it.
That is extraordinary. And thank you for sharing that level of insight. A lot of times people are a little more coy about it. And it's really great that you speak to being intentional about all those different layers.
Yeah.
Because I think that what we will see, um, people who are exposed to your record and know how wonderful it is will also approach their next projects with a certain amount of intention and stuff like that. And
Yeah.
you'll see a shift and a change and stuff like that.
Oh, Kevin,
Your
just Kevin,
shift.
we have to pause because this is so sweet. Kevin, thank you so much. I'm blushed. Can you see him?
Hello, Kevin.
Kevin says this interview is brilliant. I'm
Yeah.
blushing. Uncut raw. Thank you. Um, I love that. Sorry, Thornell. I did not mean to interrupt you. I just
No, no, no,
blushing.
absolutely. Thank you, Kevin. um, the oh goodness, where was I? Yeah, so changing and shifting the landscape in artists who are participating in the genre and things of that nature, and just being intentional about it.
So I can,
We've,
if you want, because I sort of rejected your
mm-hmm,
invitation to play earlier. I can tell you what I was
mm-hmm.
going to play and why this is a good. I could tell you the thing, and whether or not you want me to play now, but I can tell you why I
Uh,
chose the piece that I'm going to play today
okay.
because of the intentionality.
Mm-hmm.
So one of the words I had for one of the pieces was manifesting, just
Yes.
becoming masterful at saying I want this and having this show up in my life, right?
Right.
And
Mm-hmm.
manifesting can be hard. And the cover of this, so this piece that I'm going to play, or I'm going to play the motif. It's weird
Okay.
ambient stuff, right? Because I'm doing all these effects and stuff. So I'm going to play the motif and then I'm going to improvise on it. So what you hear here is not
Okay.
what's on the record. But if you look
Right.
at the album cover, there's all these moons everywhere, and I'm collecting them in this
Yes.
boat. And this idea of, so this piece is called Moon Harvest. So it's not like the
Okay.
harvest moon, but I'm actually harvesting
Harvesting
moons, but it's not
moons.
something that's comes easily because we get all those voices of I'm not worthy of this, what if I don't deserve this, or what if I'm not good enough to get that. Like, we all have our version of here's why this shouldn't be manifested. So I was like, what's a key that I can pick that's a challenge to me? And so I
Right.
picked, if you guys are musicians out here, B flat minor,
Oh, that's definitely a
play
hard one.
this piece in. So, if you hear some funky notes, that's because it's a challenge. It is a challenge. So it starts, it is positive overall. It's got a little, it's one
Mm-hmm.
of the slower pieces to it. And in the recording, I'm not going to do the vocals here, but in the recording, I did some sort of like, I have a 4 octave range. So I'm singing a low B flat and I do these vocal jumps from B flat to B flat to B flat, 4 B flats.
Uh-huh.
And it ends up sort of sounding like a scream. And some people are like, why is there a screaming woman on this? And it's not, it's a very like, it's a very tuned sort of like, I'm working on it. I'm working on it. It's always a process. And when you get to the
Right.
top, it's just this like that's when the piece opens up. I will tell you that when
Right.
I was in Greece and recording that at night,
Mm.
Greece has a lot of stray dogs. And so I was like doing this. It's not pretty without all the reverb and the tuning and all the stuff, right? But I was like
Right.
doing this really high pitched thing, and like all the dogs, I would get like maybe 4 seconds of recording in, and the dogs would start barking and like howling at me. And I was like, I stopped being offended like pretty soon, and I would just like sit there and like wait like 40 seconds, and then they would stop barking, and then I'd be like, and like do my thing, and then I was like, and then they'd start like howling again. And I was just like, it took
Right.
forever to record this track because of the cicadas and the dogs and all the things that were just, because the studio didn't have, it had like these tiny little, like it was 2 stories of stone with the little slits in the stone. It was like a half
Right.
abandoned mountain town. It was a very weird little
Right.
place with no cars. And so there was like, no windows, like things come in and out. Like it was kind of, so dogs barking anyway. So you're not going to hear that when I play it live here. You'll just hear the sort of piano motifs. But that's Moon
That sounds
Harvest.
good.
So that was my introduction to
Well,
the piece.
And we would love to hear Moon Harvest.
Okay. I'm going to move my microphone a little bit closer to the piano, and you're going to hear
Okay,
the theme of Moon Harvest with a little improvisation
sure.
for about two minutes. I won't go long.
Okay.
Okay. Um, can you hear that?
Yes, sounds great. Brava! Brava!
Thank you.
You are so, so welcome. That was gorgeous.
I
Just
appreciate that.
gorgeous.
I'm always so curious what's going to come out because I don't consider myself like an improvisation. Like I was just so nervous. So thank you for
Hmm.
listening.
Well, I enjoyed it, and I know everybody else did too. Um, when you um, made this pivot and you did this album and you realized that it helped people, whether it was your mother's, comments to you on the airplane or other, people, embracing the music before the album even came out. Um, how did you feel?
Um, to tell you the truth,
Yes.
I felt a little nervous. I was starting to feel the anxiety of having to step outside my comfort zone,
Right.
which to me was the starving artist put a record out and see it flop, and to see it already getting some legs before it came out meant that I had to like create some goals, because I am a
Yes.
firm believer that when you create something out loud,
Right.
you are that much more likely to get it. And I have I have a membership for musicians called Amplify, where this is like the theme. It's like
Okay.
we hold each other accountable to what we say we want, even when it gets
Right.
scary. So for me, the
Yes.
first step for that
Right.
was I'm gonna try to get this on the Billboard charts the week it releases, which was back in this February of this year. And that meant telling my fans what that meant, why was it important
Right.
to me, what did it
Right.
mean, and how they could help, because that was always their first question. How can I
Right.
help
How
you
can I help?
get on the Billboard charts? And I there was a level of education, and then there was like
Yes.
here are all the links, and I actually made a luminary champion page. There are 9 things you can do. If you have money, you can go buy it. If you have
Right.
time, you can go share this link. If you have all the things, and if you do all the things, it will cost you $21 and take you 9.5 minutes. Like, I had a whole list of the things if you wanted to do all the things to help as a fan. So I really made it clear how people
Right.
could help. And I was told it was right. If I had released the record 3 weeks earlier, it would have been number one on Billboard and New Age. But in the 3 weeks before my record was released, they changed how they calculate, and
Oh.
it went from sales to streams. And streams is just another Spotify. All that stuff was just one
Yeah.
of those things that I was like, cool, that's something I want to do, but that's not the game I'm playing. The game I'm playing is sales. So
Right.
they changed, and I didn't get the chart, but I was, I did rank and whatever, and that was nice. But I had to risk missing that goal, right? Or losing it or
Right.
failing at it, right? The same way right
Right.
now, I am like, you ask anyone in my life, anyone who follows me anywhere, anyone in my family, what do you think Cheryl B Engelhardt wants most right now? And they're gonna be like, oh, a Grammy nomination, a Grammy nomination. Like, it's literally what I've been talking about since I was 23, but I gave it a little break because I was like, pop's not gonna happen, blah, blah, blah.
Mm-hmm.
And now it's
Mm-hmm.
like, oh, this is like it's feasible, huh? Okay, like competition smaller. I have a record that's like really doing something in the genre. It, like, was number one on iTunes, number one on Amazon. Like, so that's the thing. I had to like get okay with just sharing what it was I wanted. And even though I didn't get the Billboard thing, I did get number one on iTunes and New Age. I did get number one on Amazon and each. Like, there are all these side effects, games that I was not playing that I was winning on the side.
Right.
So
Right.
it's like, just because I
That
didn't
turned
win
out
the
to be.
game, it doesn't mean I
Mhm.
lost.
No, it absolutely did not, because everyone who is in this game right now understands that it is the Wild Wild West and it is shifting by the moment. And so here you are, you know, putting forth, you know, this wonderful heart music and connecting with people and helping people get through the pandemic. I know so many people who, candidly, I mean, I put up an Instagram story today and I was just like, the pandemic got you stressed? My girl Cheryl has this record. You need to listen to it and come talk to her.
Oh, I need to go
Come.
see that. I don't think I saw
Yeah,
that. I'm gonna.
it's on my Instagram story today. And I was just like, this music, especially this week after using it in my own way, I was just like, I connected to it in a completely different way. And I know that's the reason why people are responding the same way that I did, and it's just wonderful because you used your own journey, and just the same way as you said, you wrote these songs about a breakup or this wonderful thing that happened in your life, and people go, oh, I felt the same way, I had the same experience, because the more specific it is, the more universal it is. And this
Yeah.
is it's a truism in pop music, and it's clearly a truism in what you've created in this new age space. I wanted to open up the floor to
Yeah.
anyone, any of our guys here who wanted to ask a question.
Yeah, I
And it's
see
unfortunate,
Kevin's question.
it should be in the, okay, there's a question. How can we help you win a Grammy? Thank you, Kevin.
Kevin, I love that question so much. Thank you, first of all, for being here and listening to me babble about all these things. That's a great question. So the first thing is, if you are a Recording Academy member and a voting person, to consider Luminary, you can go to my consideration page, which I'll type in the chat box, but it's cbemusic.co. Slash FYC. So I'm not going to ask you to do that because that's against the rules, but considering and taking a listen is one thing. If you are not a voting member, but you might know some, I just posted on my Instagram account. I am CBE Music. Everything for me is CBE Music, by the way. I just posted a video that is a 1 minute, it sort of gives you an idea of where the setting was and the music, and you can share that link with anyone in your stories. You can repost. If you are like not even in the music industry and you're just kind of listening because you're awesome, um, listening on Spotify and YouTube really helps numbers and sharing with friends because you just never know who's like cousin to know someone who's voting. Like it's kind of just like you never know. So just sharing it to your story. I think Instagram makes it really easy to share Spotify links if you're listening on Spotify. But just listening and sharing it with other people is really like the best thing. If you're not still listening as a voting member, which is either way. So yeah, thank you. I really appreciate that. Oh, you have a friend who's a voting member. Amazing. Thank you. Yeah, and it's in the new age category. It's the only new age category. Sometimes there's like a lot of different categories for like pop and jazz and stuff, but it's like the only thing for new age, and it's listed under my name. It's alphabetical. So there you go. Thank you for asking. Yeah, I love questions, so dig in. I go deep if you want. Besserat.
No, well, that's the good stuff. I mean, in the end,
Oh,
Uh-oh,
I think
did we
Thornell might
lose
have
him?
frozen. Well, I see this next question. If I could go back in time, is there anything I would have done differently career wise? That's a great question. Hmm. You know what?
wow,
Part of me thinks that maybe there's like a little like, what if I had a degree? Would
that
this be
was
any
that
different?
was that.
Um, and yeah, I'm sorry, Thornell, you cut out, so I'm answering this next question about what would I do differently career wise. And I also think that I would have owned up sooner to the fact that I had answers that other musicians wanted. Creating an online
Mhm.
membership mastermind, my Amplify group, which I've had for 4 years, has been like one of the most rewarding accountability groups that I've created for other musicians, but they're my accountability as well. And really owning that I had some resources and I was willing to create. I love teaching, so I loved creating I have a course called Rock Your Email List and another one called The Perfect Pitch, and they're all about communication really, but in these specific using technology and all that stuff. And I think I would have owned that sooner instead of thinking that that was me selling out in some way. Like I actually went out and got career coaching training, like 750 hours, so
Okay,
that not so I could have a coaching business, but so that I could really hear what was
right.
stopping other musicians, because I wished that I had that when I was sort of going to conferences for 6 years and paying money to try to find, navigate, not just be inspired, but actually figure out the actions to take. So I kind of avoided that a little bit. So I think I would like own that sooner, like when I started getting asked to speak on panels and not just be like, I'm just a musician who happened to get
Right.
talk on this panel. I'd be like, yeah, no, I know what I'm talking about, and I'm interested in helping you. Um, so I think I would have like not been so wonky about transitioning to that. But I don't know. I don't have a lot of regrets. I love the work I'm doing with social justice choirs. I'm working on a piece I wrote 3 years ago called The Listening, based on I was commissioned to write a piece based on a Martin Luther King speech called A Time to Break the Silence. It was actually against the Vietnam War. I wrote it 3 years ago. A bunch of choirs have sung it, and now a lot of these choirs are actually interested in doing a virtual version of it. And somehow, because the stars were aligned, Martin Luther King's goddaughter saw it performed in San Diego, and she's singing the solo. And so I've been able to have these amazing conversations with someone who was in the room where it happened, literally back in the 60s. And it's been really humbling that music brought me to be a part of this in the smallest way, and to hear her so excited about this piece and to be part of it and to give her a platform to literally share her gorgeous voice. So things like that, I feel like if I had done one thing differently, there might be a chance that that might not have happened, and the things that this might not have happened. So I can't say that I would go back and do anything differently, because right now I'm grateful for what's happening. So um, should I just keep reading these questions, Thornell?
Yes.
Yes, okay. Allison says yes, unless Thornell found his soprano. Luminary is the theme for a lot of cancer walks. Have you ever been approached by any of the major cancer society to have your song be the theme song for the Luminary Walk for Cancer Survivors? I have not heard that. I love that. You know what? I'll tell you something about Luminary. Last year, 2019, I pick a word of the year every year, and I picked the word luminary. And I looked it up, and then I started Googling it throughout January of last year, and I found this co working space for women. It was co working and networking called Luminary in New York City. And I went and I stalked them for like 2 months. I was on their mailing list and it just looked like this gorgeous place. I was like, there's no way I could afford it. It had just opened. Their prices weren't listed anywhere. I show up and I go there and I walked in and my soul was happy. And they were doing a Women's History Month deal that was like super, like stupid, crazy affordable. And it's like one of the main things I miss from the pandemic because I live about an hour and a half north of New York City now. And I
Mm.
would go in, I literally would put on my schedule every week for 52 weeks. And my husband knew that my luminary days, I was like out of the house at 6 and I would come home at midnight. Like I was on a train in the city, like working there and getting my so much done. And so I've started to become like a little obsessed with the word and the meaning of the word. And I have not come across that, but I would absolutely love to do that. So I might look into that. Thank you, Kevin. And my best piece of advice for aspiring musicians is get clear on what you want sooner than later and don't model it after what you've seen someone else do. And that like has a lot of onion layers to it. I could go way deeper, but like at first it might be like, I want to make money. Get it specific and get the first milestone specific enough so that you know by when and what number is attached to it. I call them in Amplify in my membership group. Oh, join Amplify because that's like awesome musicians that are like, what next? Not just starting off, but kind of like, what's next for me? We call it a champagne win. So it's like so clear what the goal is that your friends know when to break out the champagne when you get it. So instead of saying like I want more followers, I want to get my music out there, like what does that mean? Like I could throw this out the window and then my music would be out there. Like it doesn't mean anything. And we have no way to measure whether or not what we did worked or not. So to say I want 1,000 followers on Spotify, cool. Why? You want 1,000
Why?
subscribers on YouTube? Why? So you can monetize this. So you can like cool. Like have a reason. Keep asking yourself why until you stop coming up with answers. And that is the advice. But it should also all be aligned with what you really want for yourself, and that might be tied into your lifestyle or family goals or other things. So just get that all aligned. I think that's really important. Here's the thing, if you don't know what you want, like talking about it, no one else is going to know. Like the clearer you are with what you want, that's when other people are going to get it. And that's when people are like, oh, I get what you're up to. How can I help? Or, hey, I know someone, I can help you. No one can show up and help you with a thing if you don't know what the thing is. So that's why my whole shtick is get clear on the thing that you want. I hope that helps. That might be way too vague. I don't know. You're welcome to
No,
message
I
me and
think
find me
that
on
that is
social.
perfect. That is absolutely perfect. And it is important for people to be centered and specific. And that is why you are having such wonderful success. And a lot of people will be able to follow your example about getting clear on what you want and being very specific and the why. Okay, you want 1,000 followers. I love that. You want 1,000 followers. Why? What is that going to do for you? What are you going to do once you get the 1,000 followers? What is your plan? It is. I mean, I love the science and the art all wrapped up into each other.
Yeah.
Cheryl, we are coming to the end of our hour. I have enjoyed this tremendously. I have had such a wonderful, everyone had an opportunity to get such insight on you as a creative entity. And congratulations on all your success. And every step along the way was a success because it was leading you to the next opportunity to create. And here you are creating, and everybody is embracing it. And obviously, it's easy for me to say best of luck in your quest for a Grammy nomination. But somewhere along the way, I lost that dream. I used to dream about that too. Oh, I want to be a Grammy, and because I realized that I didn't have the thing that you have. And it is just so, you have no idea. Whenever I talk to you, I just go, I love her. She's fantastic. And I hope everybody learns to love you just as much as I do. So
You're so
th-
sweet. Thank you
thank
so
you
much
for
for having
joining
me.
me.
Thank you for the
You're
discussion.
welcome.
Thank you, everyone, for watching. I really appreciate your listening in the space that you created here. Um, and thank you for hosting. So it's been an
Yes,
honor.
thank you. And it's been our honor. And so we're going to take this and cut it up and push it out and share it with more people. And I think other people will just fall in love with you just like we have. So
Amazing.
thank you so much.
You're
And
welcome.
everybody, thank you for your questions and because that's what's coming through this chat.